Hi, welcome. Grab a beanbag, take a seat. Everybody's invited. Hello. If you are new here, my name is Maddie. I make mental health-based lifestyle content here on YouTube, mixed in occasionally with the bookish endeavor here and there, which is why we're here today. I'm super excited to make this video. I just kind of needed a break from mental health content. Occasionally, every once in a while, it gets to be like really, really emotional, and I just needed a bit of time where I wasn't crying. So today, we're here to talk about nonfiction, which is cool. I'm excited. A little. I'm very scared. Nonfiction intimidates me, which is part of the reason why we're here. So one of my goals this year was to read more nonfiction. There are topics that I'm really interested in that I know really can only be explored fully through nonfiction books. And so I just kind of have to bite that bullet and get over it. But of course, since I can't do anything without making a plan first, I have 5 or 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 things. I don't know if you would call them tips or steps or tricks or whatever, to help me figure out how to read nonfiction better. And I'm going to be sharing that with you guys today. I know I'm not the only person who struggles to read nonfiction, and so I thought some of these might be helpful for you guys as well. After I finish talking about the step, tip, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to share a book that I think matches that tip well. Either it's an example of the tip itself, or it just felt right to me. Sometimes I do things just based on feelings. Seems legit to me. Okay, now just a disclaimer. Obviously, this is a plan, right? So I haven't tried and tested this yet. I don't know if any of these actually help, any of these actually work. They feel like they'll help me, but no promises if it does absolutely nothing for you. So, okay, so first step, analyze why it didn't work out in the past. So I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you have tried to read nonfiction and you can't really get through one, or you can't connect with one, or whatever. So what you need to do is sit down and think about why that didn't work out. Maybe it was the format of the nonfiction. Maybe it was a collection of essays and you just don't jive with that. Maybe it was the topics itself. Maybe it was a historical retelling and turns out you're not that into history. You know, think about why it didn't work out and then think through solutions that might work. I feel like we typically think about nonfiction as a whole, as an entire genre, when in reality it's not. It's more like a label. And there are thousands of genres that fall underneath of nonfiction. Maybe not thousands. There are a lot of genres that fall underneath of nonfiction. I feel like what happens most often is that people pick up self-help books and think that that's all nonfiction has to offer, when in reality there are a lot of other things that you can read. There are memoirs, there are collections of essays about feminist topics, about health. There are cookbooks, which are technically nonfiction. There's poetry, and there's theology, there's books about religion. There are a lot of different topics. Pretty much any topic you can think of, there's probably a nonfiction book about it. So maybe that was it. Maybe you just picked up a self-help book and that wasn't what was for you. You know, try something new, try something different. The one that I want to share with you for this one is Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice. The reason why I picked this one to share here is because I've actually tried to read this one before, and I gave up because it was really, really dense. The reason why I'm scared most of nonfiction is because I have it like ingrained in my head from school that I'm going to either be tested about the topic, or I am reading this specifically to pull out information so I can argue another point. My brain is so wrapped up in school, and that's why nonfiction doesn't work out for me. And this is incredibly dense. And as I was going through it, there was a lot of stuff about this that went over my head and that I didn't understand. And so instead of pushing through and picking up what I could from the novel, I got this weird feeling that somebody was going to ask me about it and I wasn't going to be able to explain it well or something. I just felt like I knew that I was going to fail the test that did not exist after reading this book, and so I didn't want to finish it, which is obviously bullshit. No one's going to test me after this. No one's going to ask me about it and care if I don't know the answer, And there's stuff in here that is invaluable. So even if I only pick up one nugget of wisdom, that's still one more nugget of wisdom that I had now than I had before I read this, Just to give you a little bit more context about this, this is a collection of essays written about the intersection of disability and race. The vibe I'm getting is kind of like a rallying cry, here's radical love, radical acceptance. Here's how we as a society could be completely better if we dismantled all of what we already have, basically. It argues why we should put people with disabilities in positions of power, why we should celebrate and center disabled voices and the work and the art that they create and the things that they contribute to society. It's just about radical acceptance and radical love and doing more for the people around you. It was really good so far. It's incredibly dense, so I'm nervous, but I think it's worth the time and effort that it'll take me to get through. So, fingers crossed. Step number 2 is find your type of nonfiction. So when thinking about your type of nonfiction, I think it's best to think about 3 things. 1, genre and topic. So what are you interested in? What do you care about? What do you want to know more about? Think about that. Your nonfiction book should center somewhere around that, because obviously you're not going to enjoy something that you don't care about, right? Second, think about format. So what I mean by this is it a collection of essays? Is it written in letters? Is it written all as one book that you read front to back? Are each of the chapters like kind of individual, or is everything linked together? Find what feels most comfortable for you. Find what feels easiest and what feels most natural. The third thing to think about is like format again, but in this time, I mean like audiobook, ebook, physical book, that kind of thing. What do you normally do? How do you normally read your books? That's how you should be reading nonfiction. I feel like there's a lot of pressure to like read nonfiction in physical format and to like highlight and annotate and take notes in the side. And if you only listen to audiobooks, keep listening to audiobooks. If you suddenly switch into physical format, that's going to disrupt all of the reading habits that you already have. And so you're not going to want to do it, because it's going to feel like a completely separate thing rather than just transitioning from fiction to nonfiction in your reading habits. My biggest tip for this is to find what already feels comfortable. So if you read a lot of romance novels and you like when they have a little bit of a feminist kind of commentary in it, then maybe you pick up a feminist collection of essays that's about dating in your 20s, right? Similar topic, but just a different format, just a different method of delivery. As I'm going through this list, I realize that a lot of these books are disability books. Sorry, but that's what's important to me right now. For this one, I picked Disability Visibility, and this is a collection of essays written by people who have disabilities. And it's all about putting their stories and their voices in the forefront and making them more visible, because disabled people, there's a history of trying to silence them and keep them quiet and hidden away. And this is meant to actively talk back against that. From what I can gather, it is also about understanding what disability looks like now in our day and age in an attempt to humanize it more. Not to make it more relatable, but to kind of bridge that gap between people with disabilities and people without disabilities, to dismantle that stigma around what a disability looks like, sounds like, feels like, acts like. And it sounds really good. It sounds really great. I've heard a lot of really, really good things about this one, so I'm hype for that bad boy. So the third thing is to plan your reading sessions. And so I mean this kind of in 2 ways. 1, when you start a book, plan out in your day 30 minutes to an hour to sit down and really sink your teeth in. And the reason why you need this is you need that establishing time. If you're just picking up a nonfiction book and you've only got 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes there, it's going to be really hard for you to understand the writing style and to get used to the voice in the story and to understand kind of how the book is structured and laid out. And without that establishing time, it's going to be a lot harder for you to figure out when and where you can read this book and how you can consume it. So if you spend 30 minutes to an hour with a book and you realize that, oh, okay, these are kind of written in little vignettes, little snapshots. So I can take 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes there to finish this book and not feel disoriented, not feel like I'm jumping in and out, not feel like I have to get re-centered in the story every time. Or maybe this is one of those books where I need to sit down and spend half hour, 45 minutes and really kind of get into that headspace and into that mindset in order to enjoy it. So that establishing hour is going to give you a lot of information about the novel itself that's going to help you consume it better. Secondly, make it comfy. Do the things that you love most to do while reading. So maybe that's putting music on in the background. Maybe that's lighting some candles, getting into your comfiest PJs, sit in your favorite reading spot. Do the things that make reading most enjoyable for you. you're already doing something so new anyway, right? Like nonfiction is already something that's hard for you. You might as well make everything else around it as enjoyable and as easy as possible. This is just going to make everything better overall. Oh, sweet, good God. The book that I chose for this one is On Our Best Behavior. The tagline is The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good. And I think what it does is literally go through the 7 deadly sins and talk about how women are kind of conditioned to follow those things without explicitly ever being told to. So it's about all of the like silent little lessons that women learn that keep us silent and submissive and obedient so that we can be seen as good and deserving and righteous of taking up space, being here, existing. This book sounds absolutely fantastic. And the reason why I put this here is because I just know that this is going to give me such like feminine energy, and it's going to make me feel so powerful as a woman that I want to read this in the most atmospheric of places, This is one of those books that I want to enjoy like in the bath with like candles going, where like I can pretend that like men don't even exist, That's the kind of vibe that I need to enjoy this book, and I can't wait to make that happen. I'm not putting that back where it goes. It was way too difficult to get that out. Okay, so these next couple ones are kind of wild. And by that I mean just kind of unconventional advice, maybe. The first one is don't read the introduction. And like, I know that sounds counterintuitive. Like the introduction is there, to get you oriented in the space and to help you kind of get an overview of what they're going to be talking about. But honestly, most of the time, the introduction, all it does is kill the momentum you have while you're reading. Because when you get to the end of the introduction, it feels like such a natural place to stop that most of the time, that's what happens. Or at least that's what happens for me. I'll be getting through the introduction and then the introduction will be over and I'm like, oh, well, that was a perfect place to stop. I've got a nice little overview. I will just come back when I'm ready. And then I never come back. And so for me, this one's really important because I know that that's a habit that I have. So to break that habit, I'm just not going to read the introductions. And if I'm being honest, oftentimes the introduction is full of stuff that's not really that relevant. Like, yes, they lay out their thesis and they typically lay out their like ideas and stuff like that, but they also talk about like how they got inspiration for the book and how long it took them to write it and their writing process. And it's really kind of a place where authors feel like they can talk about the nitty-gritty of the book, which is really interesting if you're into the book. Putting it at the beginning before I've read any of the book, I don't care yet. And so that makes me not want to read more. Basically, introductions are just like the perfect recipe for me not to finish a book, and so I'll just be skipping them all together this year. Maybe afterwards, if I'm super into it, I'll read it then. For this book, I have chosen The Myth of Normal. You see it. It's huge. I feel like this one is self-explanatory. I'm skipping the introduction because if I don't dive right in, I'll never make it happen. Reading the introduction would actually be detrimental for me with this book because it's so big and it's so massive that I know that I'm going to read the introduction and get overwhelmed and not want to keep going. So we're skipping that altogether. I think another like mini sub tip is just that like you can take your time. I know for a fact that this is going to be one of those books that I'm going to be reading for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It's a long book, not only that, but it's also really in depth, and it's got a lot of information that I know is going to be hard to swallow, and it's going to make me need to process and journal and do a lot of stuff around the actual act of reading the book itself. So I know it's going to take me a long time. And I'm okay with that. I'm very, very okay with that. And I think we need to reintroduce that into the world of reading with Book Talk and BookTube and seeing all of these creators who read for a living and they're wrapping up 10, 12, 13 books a month. It pushes you to want to read really, really fast. The average person does not read that fast, and that's totally okay. I just feel like there's a lot to be had in slowing down when reading a book, especially when reading nonfiction that isn't celebrated or highlighted in like the internet culture of reading books, you know? So just another tiny sub thing. If it takes you 6 months to read a book, that's totally fine. No one's judging you, I promise. Oh, I didn't even explain what this was. Okay, so this is a book about how society and culture and the way that it's set up prevents us from being fully healthy and then never really allows us to heal completely. Which sounds already devastating. And I've heard that a lot of this in the beginning is simultaneously reaffirming for people who live with disability, but also kind of really, really sad because it highlights everything that you're feeling and puts everything that you're feeling into words, but also forces you to confront the fact that that really is what you're feeling and that really is how the world around you is, and it's not getting any better anytime soon. So it's hard and dense and emotionally taxing, but I've also heard that the latter half of the book is incredibly hopeful, and it gives you tips and tricks and things to help you feel better about the world and hopefully to heal a bit. So the front half is really hard, but the back half is really worth it, which gives me a little hope that I'll be able to actually read this one. Okay, the next one is going to sound just as counterintuitive and unorthodox. That is pick and choose. So pick and choose the chapters that you want to read. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of nonfiction books are written with the understanding that people are going to dip in and out of them. And so you don't particularly have to read them to cover. I'm not saying that there's not going to be stuff in the chapter that you're reading that might not make a ton of sense, that might, call back something that was brought up before. But the really great thing about nonfiction is that they have glossaries, they have indexes, at least most of them do. So if you're reading a chapter and you run into something that you don't understand or you don't know, you can look it up in the index and then read that tiny bit of information to understand what that is and then go back to where you were before. It's really that easy. I think this one is incredibly helpful because nonfiction books can span a lot of information when in reality you're only really looking for one or two things that are incredibly interesting to you, that you care about. And if you have to slog through 5 chapters to get through those 2 chapters that you want to read, you're never going to make it there because you're reading about stuff that you're not interested in, you're reading about stuff that you don't care about, and just to get to the stuff that you do care about, and that's not really worth it, in my opinion. And also, if the author has done their job, reading the chapters that you want to read will make you want to read the rest of the book as well. So no harm, no foul, in my opinion. The one that I chose for this one is Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good. I chose this one because it is an anthology, which means that it's a collection of poems, essays, commentary, there's art in here, there's a lot of stuff, and it's written by a lot of people, and some of them I really jive with, and some of them I really don't. And so in order to get what I can out of this book, I am gonna have to pick and choose because I'm just not interested in everything that's in here, and that's totally okay. So this book is about, pretty much exactly what the tagline says, the politics of feeling good. It challenges the idea that social activism and that social justice needs to be another form of work, when in reality it can be just as enjoyable and just as pleasurable as everything around us. But it also talks about how, we should be seeking pleasure first. We should be seeking things that feel good, so much so that it makes it almost impossible for us to settle for things that don't feel good anymore. It has essays in here from Audre Lorde, Joan Morgan, Cara Page, Sonia Renee Taylor, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, a lot of pretty prominent feminist voices. And it talks about everything from sex work to climate change, from race and gender to sex and drugs. And it's all about how the politics of feeling good is a politics in and of itself, and how we should explore that and we should care about that more and talk about that more. Maybe this will completely change my life. Who knows? Okay, last tip. This one is the most counterintuitive, but the goal is not to finish the book. That's what I'm repeating to myself. That's kind of the mantra of reading nonfiction for me this year. It's not to finish the book. I know that when you pick up a book, that's what's most satisfying, is being able to read it from cover to cover, shut the book, know that you've read every single word on those pages. But in reality, when you're working with something like nonfiction, something that's new to you, something that's new to your lifestyle and your reading habits, you're not going to finish every nonfiction book that you start. Just like I was saying in Pick and Choose, there are going to be things that you don't even want to read about in those books. And so why force yourself to read them when you don't want to? Why ruin an entire genre when you don't have to? The goal of this is to get out of these books what I can, to get over my fear of nonfiction, to break the stigma that I have in my head about nonfiction and what that looks like and what I need to do in order to enjoy it, to break the expectation that I'm getting enough out of the book. Anything I get out of the book is enough. And that's the goal. The goal is to leave the book with more than I had when I showed up. And even if I read 3 pages, that'll be the case every single time. Basically, this is indicative of a larger thing that I want to establish in my life. And so I've been trying to practice in small ways, little bits of imperfection, which means that understanding that half of something is better than nothing of something. And I think the easiest way to implement that right now is through this nonfiction. If that doesn't make sense, think about it this way. When you first started reading stories as a kid, you didn't immediately jump into like War and Peace or something, right? You started with picture books, and then you graduated to first chapters, and then you graduated to middle grade, etc., etc. And I know that we're not sitting here trying to learn how to read all over again, but we are sitting here trying to learn how to read differently. And so that's going to take some time. That's going to take some practice to get used to get into the swing of things. And so if sitting down and reading a book cover to cover is what's stopping you from practicing that ability, then that's not the goal. That's not what's important. Make finishing the book not the goal anymore. Make the goal to practice, to get better at this skill. Make the goal to get something out of it that you didn't have before. Make the goal something else. Don't make the goal finishing the book. It's putting too much pressure on yourself, and it's not necessary right now. We're learning. We have to be nice to ourselves. The last one that I chose for this one, it's going to have a glare on it because it still has a library plastic on it, but it is called The Invisible Kingdom. And this is a book about invisible illnesses and invisible chronic illnesses and how most people in the United States have and live with an invisible illness, and we don't treat it right and we don't treat it well, and we need to talk about it. I put this one here just because this was the last spot. I think this actually feels like one of the ones that I might read cover to cover. This feels like one of the ones that I might be able to get through the entire way, but it didn't have anywhere else to go on the list. So that's The Invisible Kingdom. I'm excited to read it. Yay. Okay, so I hope you guys got some good tips, some good information to maybe help you understand how to tackle nonfiction this year. This is a really, really big goal of mine, so I'm hoping that this works out for me, and I'd love to know if it works out for you as well. So if something was helpful, or if you have tips of your own about how you get through nonfiction, comment below. I'm very, very curious. At the very least, I hope you got yourself a book rack, because these all should slap. Pretty excited for every single one of them. If only I could get over my fear. If you liked this video, could you please actually like the video? It would help me out a lot. And if you liked me, maybe you could subscribe. Stick around. I'm nice and funny. We do cool things over here, I like to think. All right, that's it for me. I'm wishing you guys all the love, the light, and the happiness in the world, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.